Hi, everybody. Lauren here with Blaine, and welcome back to another episode of Energy Works. And this is kind of a fun topic that we're going to talk about today. It's sort of a little bit about self-consciousness, and not in the self-study yogic tradition of self-consciousness, the Svadhyaya lineage of self-consciousness. This is sort of more of the Western, oh no, I'm self-conscious about something and feeling not great about it. And it came about because, well, for a lot of reasons, but it kind of came to a point where we decided to do a podcast about it. I was teaching at Kripalu, where I teach annually, and I was in the food line, and you've got your little name tag on, and I think, is it a different color for teachers versus students? I'm not sure. But anyway, somebody was next to me in the line, and they recognized me or my name tag, and she was like, "Oh, it's so exciting to meet you. I listen to your podcast every Monday. I can't wait for the podcast to come out." And she just kind of went on. And then I was like, "Oh, thank you." And we got our food and separated and went to where we were going. But my heart rate was up. I could feel like I was totally like flushed. I was a little sweaty. I was nervous. And I realized that we've been doing this podcast not that long, since the 1st of July of 2024. So not even a full year. And we have some listeners and people listen, but all of a sudden it felt like, wow, people are listening to us. And it made me so self-conscious. And I noticed that when we would go to do a podcast, Blaine, I would be so like hyper vigilant about everything that I was going to say. Usually, I mean, me and Blaine have known each other for a really long time, and we talk all the time together. So that's kind of how the podcast evolved anyway. We're like, we talk all the time. Let's talk about interesting things that would be helpful to other people. That sounds great. Sounds like a great podcast idea. But then all of a sudden I was like, people are listening. And I felt the weight of that, or the intensity of that. Like maybe I'm going to do something wrong or get canceled or get taken out of context. Or I started comparing myself to all the other podcasts that I listen to that I adore. And I think I'm nowhere near as good as that. So then I got into that hypercritical viewing. And it really just kind of put a wrench in I'm not going to lie, in my joy of doing this podcast, which is funny because when you do a podcast, you want people to listen. And all of a sudden people are telling me they're listening. And now I'm like, I can't do anything. I can't say anything. So my flow was really interrupted. And so we're going to talk about that today, because Blaine, you've had a little bit of a similar experience as well.
Absolutely. I love what you said, just to back up. We are self-conscious, but not in the yogi conscious of the self. It's like the ego protection self-conscious, where we don't want, to get our feelings hurt or be embarrassed or, get locked in that perfectionism, or what do people think of us and what do people say about us, and that kind of energy. And absolutely, I think we've talked before. I wanted to have a podcast for a long time before I found you to be my podcast partner, because I did want it to be with a partner, but also to get up the courage to even take one single step, researching how you do it, what kind of equipment do you need, what kind of help do I need from someone to get the technology set up, and all of that. And the reason why it took me so long to get from, step -1 to step 0 is the fears that you're talking about now are just, it's ego protection, just the avoidance, because man, people can be mean. And I think especially since the pandemic and cancel culture and a lot of things have happened, there was a big wave of it there for a while too, that it was pretty much walking on eggshells for a lot of people there for a while. And I even have seen podcasts, or maybe, YouTube videos, where someone takes someone else's podcast or video and watches it. And so the video is of someone watching someone else's video and commenting. So they'll, play the video for a minute or two and then hit pause. Be like, okay. And like give that a big critique. And anything that we put out in the online world, that could happen. I mean, when you're out there, unless you take something down. But even then, sometimes that doesn't even work depending on who's put it on another server where it's been backed up or something like that. And so, yeah, 100%. I have had the same experience as you, people who just kind of out of the blue tell me that they love the podcast. A lot of them are in the energy medicine yoga community. We have our online membership where we teach every week, and we have a little chit chat before class and after class. So people will say to me, Blaine, I loved the podcast this week. It really moved me when you said, A, B, or C. And I have that heart rate kind of goes up. But I also, just to balance out the teeter-totter here, I have a lot of friends in my real world, who are like, "What? You have a podcast?" And so that gives me a little bit of balancing out. Like, yes, I do.
That is so funny. I have the same thing too, like, because I don't really tell a lot of people, like, IRL, right, in real life, where what I do at all, right? And so sometimes we'll go out to an event or something, and somebody, that's people, what they ask is, what do you do? And I just say, I teach yoga. And my husband's always like, wait, what? Like, you wrote 3 books, you have this online school that's global reach, you do a podcast, like you're not just, I don't mean just a yoga teacher, because I feel like saying I'm a yoga teacher encompasses all of that. But it is also a little, it's not even humble bragging. It's that, and I think I might have read about this at a newsletter, or we've talked about it, but I like to be the one asking questions. So if I just say something like that, then it goes to the side, then I can go back into the seat of, so tell me about you. And not that I'll say, like, what do you do? Because I don't really love those kind of questions. Then I'll get to dig further, instead of, if someone's like, oh, you've written 3 books, what are they about? Where did they get published? What, and then people, how do you publish a book? Like, it goes like that. And I generally don't want to have that conversation. But what you said before, because we talked about this with the mean voices in your head, we've talked about this same thing, this sort of self-consciousness of putting something out there. And I mentioned how I introduced the Sebastian Younger podcast, and how I just still cringe when I think about that intro, even though it's one of the favorite podcasts that I've ever done. It was so phenomenal. And yet I've got this self-criticism about just like one sentence. It was one sentence in that introduction. And so here we are now, and now people are coming up to us and saying, we've listened to your podcast. And so Blaine and I talked a little bit about that cancel culture is real. Like, that's a real thing, whether you agree with it or not. And I feel like there's shades of gray of what people agree with. Like, some events or some people, you're just like, well, they went a bridge too far now, they deserve to be canceled. And then some is just like the mob going after, somebody. And then other times too, it's like a reversed thing, right? So now, just coming out in the news today, or not today, but recently, is, this whole thing with Blake Lively and the other guy in the movie with her, that he orchestrated a smear campaign against her because he didn't want her to tell what her experience was on the set that might have canceled him. So he tried to cancel her so she couldn't cancel him. Like, this is what our world is like right now. And so then everyone's taking sides based on, a 1-minute thing that they saw on their feed that was forced into their feed through this campaign. So I feel like, to come back to our topic, is that on some level, we are well justified to be a little nervous about, I want to say this, being our authentic selves. Because this is what we do in EM yoga. This is what we teach. This is what we do. This is what we strive for. We're always stripping away the layers of, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
I think we can say whatever we want.
Okay. So stripping away the layers of like the bullshit or the crap, it's like we're trying to get to the essence, the truth of ourselves. And if you've got that fear that your authentic self is going to be criticized or canceled or made fun of, I don't know if we've talked about shame yet, but that is one of the hugest motivating emotions in the world and one of the worst to experience. And if someone's ridiculing you on social media in like the viral world, it's horrible. And so I feel like I've like reeled back a little bit of my authentic self because of that fear. Ugh, even saying that out loud sounds horrible. Yuck. Huck tooey. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I do a little bit of that too. Maybe like one or two steps back from the full authenticity. And the subject we talk about, is not everybody sees the world through the lens of energy. And so I think that it can, if someone wanted to pull things out of context and make it all sound loony or whatever, like it probably, for someone who is skilled at doing that, they wouldn't have to try that hard. Even YouTube. So when people put in YouTube comments, I don't know if you saw this one, Lauren. So YouTube will often they just post the comment. But YouTube has a little filter that if they think maybe it's disparaging or negative or something like that, they put it in pending. And then either Lauren and I have to go through like the pending comments and approve it. And once we approve it, then it gets posted as a comment. So YouTube has a little filter to protect us from some terrible comment just going live for everyone to see. And someone wrote, it was something like, woo, woo, like WOO, like woo, woo. I love the woo. Bring on the woo. What we need in this world is more woo. And then her final sentence, because when you first started reading it kind of looked like it was completely making fun of us. But then her final few words were like, I'm so glad I found this podcast. I didn't even know that I was looking for this, but somehow YouTube, served it up to me and it was exactly what I needed. But clearly YouTube thought that maybe that was disparaging. And so filtered it out into the pending, to be approved list.
And did you approve it?
It could go up. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that it's a concern because it's a somewhat valid concern. I mean, we would have a day that went off track if somehow we found out that someone was taking videos of us and slicing them and taking them out of context and using them for their own likes, clicks, and the entertainment that to help them elevate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't even think of it that way, to help them elevate themselves. I sort of was thinking it more to denigrate us. Either way, it's it's toxic and it's undesirable as an understatement. And being humans, being creatures of this earth, I think it's really it's hard to just ignore all that or avoid it or pretend it isn't true. And there's another piece of it too, is we don't ever want to offend anybody. And the line of what offends people is also a moving target, right, all the time. And I remember I was teaching at Hollyhock one year, and I was sharing some energy medicine techniques. And, these are techniques that go back to the beginning of humans being humans. Like, this is how we evolved, is because we used our energy in ways of healing. And, way before you could go to a hospital, there's ways that you can heal yourself using the energy of the body. And that was discovered by our ancient ancestors. And so a lot of these techniques are very ancient and old. And they've also been used, in beneficial ways and in very not so beneficial ways, because energy is real and it's powerful. And so, there's things like when you're doing a martial arts, not a fight, but you're in a gym, right? Or you're in a dojo and you're practicing, right? And there's things that you can do to bring the energy of your opponent down and to bring your energy up. And there's actually like movements that do that. Well, some of these movements have also been used in religious traditions around the globe and over the years to keep the people in power and the people not in power not in power. And I'm sort of talking around it again because I don't want to say it right out loud, because I shared this at this class that I was doing, and there was a woman who was very quite religious, and did she drop out of the class? She might have dropped out of the class, but not only did she do that, but she like went to the office and she complained about me. I think I had also said that everybody could go pee outside because we're in the woods and there's only one bathroom. There's a lot of us, and she did not like that. She did not like that the church might have used energy sort of literally against the people of the church, and she did not like that I said that you could go outside and pee. Either way, she dropped out of the class, and I don't know if she tried to get me in trouble, but she certainly she reported me, which is, the same thing. And so, and on the one hand, I felt horrible that I had offended her, but at the other hand, what I was sharing was not true. And so then it's like that line, like, of who you're protecting isn't the right word. Anyway, I've kind of rambled a little bit, but all of this is like floating through my mind all the time. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to put anybody off. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And all of that gets to become, for me, edit, 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 like in my head, edit, edit, edit. So then instead of just flow, it's edit, 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 and then say a sentence and pause and wait, instead of flow and flow, like a regular conversation, where in a regular conversation, things come up all the time that you get challenged on and you're confronted with, and you've got to go back and forth. And like, that's the juice of a conversation, right? That's like why we want to have conversations and why we want to listen to other people having conversations. Like, that's why we tune into podcasts. You don't tune into a podcast to hear like, it's a beautiful day, everybody's happy, see you later. Right? Like, why?
Yeah, totally. And I bet if we like went to the whatever podcasters convention, I'm sure there is, I bet most people would say something like that. There's kind of your off-camera self and your on-camera self. And not that they're radically different, because I don't think either of us are very different. And plenty of our yoga students listen to this podcast. And I don't think any of them would say, wow, Blaine, you, the yoga teacher, talking to me live, and you on the podcast are like two different people. Yeah, I don't think anyone would say that. I think that, it's like 96, 97% the same, but there is a little bit of that, like where the brain being 2 or 3 steps ahead of the mouth, and just kind of, keeping that, versus sometimes things can fly out of the mouth if you don't have that going, that we don't want to have that here. But on the other hand, we can edit, and we have never, listeners, this is, I believe, episode 31, and we have never gone and edited anything out. We have talked about it, though. Mm-hmm. We have talked about editing things out, and we've even talked about not releasing afterwards. And then we've always made the decision to not edit and to release as originally done. So, but we go through, like Lauren said, kind of that, okay, we stop hitting record. We maybe, go on about our day. We put our head on the pillow that night. And then it's like, what, did I say that? Should I have said that? How could people have taken that? Or, and go through it then. And then let's see, we send each other a few texts. Then we talk about it and have a little discussion. And then, but we've always let it fly. Mm-hmm. We haven't to this date edited something out.
Okay, I want to just in full disclosure, we have edited and on my say so a couple of things from Cool People Big Ideas. And that's a little bit different because it's me
Mm,
interviewing other people. And a lot of times we've got two cameras going, and, some of them are quite long. And we've edited a couple of things out of them. And I'll be full disclosure, one edit or two edits that I requested was because when I went back and listened to it, I was like, you sound like such an idiot. You have to edit that one sentence out. And I feel like there's that piece of the self, not self study, not svadhyaya, but what you said, the ego self there, that I do get caught up in I think a lot more in the Cool People Big Ideas parts of these podcasts because I'm interviewing some pretty heavy hitters, some pretty brilliant people in the world. I mean, Sebastian Younger, Rupert Sheldrake, Dan Millman. Like these are big people in the world, and I want to be able to be. It's not about being their equal, but I want to be worthy of having this conversation, and by worthy I mean intellectually. I want to be able to draw something out that's different. These people on podcasts, millions, not millions, but hundreds of times, certainly. Rupert said that he gets 30 or 40 requests a month or a week to do podcasts. So he's been on a lot of podcasts. And so my goal is always to bring something new to the table or different to the table. I don't want to just have the same podcast over and over again that we've all heard before. And so I'm really hard on myself. I do a ton of preparation and then I try to let that go. And then I do the podcast. And then afterwards I call Blaine. I'm like, that was horrible. I was horrible. I can't believe I said that. And, I had this thing after, because I just interviewed Ann Hood, who is this incredible writer, wonderful person, good friend. And I feel like I didn't quite do her justice. And that's what it is. More than like for my own ego, it's my own ego in relation to them. Like I didn't elevate her in the best way that I could have, or anybody else on the podcast. And so I have this thing that I come to every time after I interview someone, like, I did not do that as well as I could have. And that kind of again puts that piece up of self-consciousness. And it's not really helpful. I don't think it's helpful in becoming a better podcaster. I don't think that, I mean, I think having a healthy dose of critical skills, like being able to review what you've done and, how can you do better. But that constant sort of hypervigilance that we're talking about, I don't think that's helpful in making you a better person or a better podcaster or a better teacher for that matter. I don't know what you think about that.
yeah, yes, you're right. When I was talking about no edits, I was talking about the dialogue between you and I, not Cool People Big Ideas. That does go through a more strenuous editing process for all the reasons you said. And yes, there have been at least one time that you're like, take this one thing out. I don't like how I
I cannot
sounded.
lie.
And I think, I mean, back to your question on like, is it necessary, right? I guess yes and no. It's all yin yang, right? And Lauren and I want to do a yin yang episode, which we haven't done yet. But this is an example of this, maybe to you sounding esoteric idea of yin and yang, how I think about yin and yang all the time. Like it's never all yes or all no, right? There is a amount of reflection that is, I think, good and appropriate and part of growth and learning and self-image, but also just putting out a product to people, if we want to call this podcast a free product, that is worthy of their time. And so, like valuing people's time. And I think that people trust us. I don't think any of us who are podcast listeners or, those of us who engage in media of any type, if we don't trust who we're giving our precious time to, we're not going to give them our time. And so, like, we honor that people trust us enough to spend their precious time with us. And so we do want to be authentic and be ourselves and not some, fake version of the ideal whatever, and not be ourselves. But we also are learning and growing. And I knew going into a podcast, because I've been a podcast listener since early days of the podcast and of podcasting. That's what of podcasting being a thing. I mean, 15 years or something. I've been listening to podcasts. And I know, because I've listened to people long enough, that everyone hates their like first 50 or 100 episodes. Like, everybody is like, oh my God, those first whatever 30, 60, 90, 100 episodes I did were so terrible that I just want to take them down. I just want to take them down. But I don't. And so I knew this. So we're at 31, right? We're going to be at 131 at some point and be like, oh my God, like that was like that first year, because you get better, but you have to just start. Like, you have to just start. And then you do it again, like anything else. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And then, a couple years later, you're way better at it, but you wouldn't be that good at it if you hadn't started. And so learning as you go for anything, this doesn't just apply to podcasting, obviously, but any endeavor, just getting going and being not that good, and, struggling and listening to yourself and doing all your energy medicine techniques on yourself to keep yourself calm about what is happening. And then you get more and more skilled. I feel like that as a writer. When I first started writing newsletters and blog posts and all that, I mean, I literally felt like I wanted to throw up every time that something went out into the world. It was just, and I'm up next to Lauren, who's this incredible writer, and we both write the newsletters. I don't feel like I want to throw up all the time though, but I know I have, such a long way to go, but I've also, I wouldn't be the writer I am today if I hadn't, let those pieces fly that I will never read again back then. And so I think the self-study and self-critique, to an extent, it's the yin and the yang, right? Like it's a balanced, in like this balanced way. And you don't want to do it when you're having a terrible day, right? You want to come into a balanced place when you go through an exercise like that. And this, I mean, I think this applies to all the listeners, whatever, as you're, working and growing, and, it can be a relationship, it can be a creative endeavor, it can be a church project, it can be, whatever it is, that like watching yourself and healthy critiquing yourself so you can always learn and grow. And people are watching you. And so then people are always watching us. And so then we can like continue to role model for others.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, the practice. I mean, of course, that's the whole yoga. That is yoga. um, and it's something Dan Millman writes about too. I've been, I'm about to interview him, so I'm steeped in his work, and everything is difficult until it isn't. And by practicing, and then what was impossible becomes easy. And so I think there's a lot of validity to that. And I think that, we do want to get better. And so reflecting on what we've done is valuable. The part that I think is less valuable is that hypervigilance around being watched or being seen. And I hadn't thought about this till you just said that, like you're always being watched. I remember, oh gosh, I hope my mom's not listening to this. She rarely listens to these podcasts. So, but she used to say to me all the time when I was younger, she'd be like, stop doing that. You're making everybody look at you, because I am a big person. I am a big personality. I am loud. I am flamboyant. I sing all the time. Like, who I am now is who I was then. Like, it's not, I was always big and loud and theatrical. Like, that was my roots, is theater. And so she would say that to me. And at some point, I don't know if I said it to her, but I had a epiphany in myself that they're watching no matter what. Whether you dress provocatively or you dress in Carhartts, Somebody's watching you, right? So they, whatever that they is for you. And I thought, okay, I made this sort of thing in my head that if I stepped out of the car onto a piece of glass because I was driving barefoot, which I do. I don't think that's legal, but I do. Anyway, I stepped on a piece of glass and you know, severed a vein in my foot and I'm bleeding and I'm limping to the curb and I rip off my scarf and I wrap it around my foot and I'm limping and I'm dragging and I'm crying and I'm like, I'm not doing that to gain attention, right? It's just something happened and I'm responding to it. And if a lot of people are staring at me, like I am still just doing what I need to do to survive, which is wrap the foot, get some water, stop, all of those things. So I thought, well, what if I just did everything like that? Like I am just doing what I'm doing. If you think it's crazy and off the wall, that's you. I'm just doing me. And I'm not doing me to gain attention. Like, although we sort of are doing this podcast to, I don't know if it's to gain attention. Maybe that's a different podcast. We're doing this podcast to share information to help people. And so that's our motivation. And so anything else that happens that's outside of that is, oh, well, that's I cut my foot and I'm bleeding and I'm going to wrap it up and I'm going to clean it and I might cry. But I'm doing that because that's what's happening. I'm not doing that so you'll look at me or so you'll, draw attention to myself. And so I think to have that idea of like, you're just being who you are, then those other things can fall away, even though maybe what we're doing is bringing more and more and more and potentially more and more attention to ourselves. If we can stay in the place of I'm just doing exactly what I need to do in every moment. I'm saying what I need to say in every moment. Nothing is superfluous or gratuitous. Then you can really stay in your own center more and not get thrown around when people are like, I saw you, I watched you, da, 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 da. And flip side of that, it's like, then you also don't take the praise or the criticism to the ego, right? Like, oh my God, you changed my life. Well, no, I said something that allowed you to find a piece that you needed to find. That doesn't make me feel like I'm amazing, and just this converse of like, that was horrible. Why? I wish I had that hour back, Then also I don't take that on of like, ugh, I'm an awful person. I wish I could give you that hour back, So again, with the yin and yang, it's like if you don't take either of those on, you allow yourself to stay more in your integrity, which is what we teach and is the point of one of the points of doing this work and is staying in your integrity. And I kind of think one of the points of life, right? Integrity is not just what you say and do, but, the integrity of the physical body, integrity of the energetic body, integrity of your spiritual life. Like staying in integrity with yourself leads to all of those things being whole, being healed.
So, Lauren, I know we wanted to share a couple of techniques for when we feel ourselves getting pulled off center, either when we're, reflecting on something we said or maybe some feedback we got or something like that. Do you want to go ahead and share?
I do. And there's a few things I want to just add intellectually first, and then I'm going to go to the energy, which is always easier than the intellect or the physical, the energetic, which is why we love it. It's because it's easy and powerful. But one of the things is to not take yourself so seriously. And so that whole idea of, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. That's the word I used. I'm not worthy to have this conversation with Nassim Haramein. Well, throw that out the window. Don't take yourself so seriously. You're going to sit down and have a conversation, and it is going to be what it's going to be. I think that's an important piece. Feeling uncomfortable, but choosing to do it anyway, which is what you and I do every time we show up here. We feel uncomfortable, we made a commitment, and we're doing it. And one of the good things about the feedback is we get feedback that says it is of value to people. So we are, we are doing what we set out to do and achieving what we set out to do, which is to help people. So you really can't go wrong when that's your end goal. Let's see. I think those were the two. Oh, the whole perfectionism piece. We should do a whole podcast on that. We should do a podcast about that. I just gave you 4 Easter eggs of podcasts coming up, so we'll touch on perfectionism again, and the whole comparison piece of comparing yourself to others. Oh, I was honest. I was gonna start to sing. Nothing compares to you. I won't sing it. Go listen to either Prince singing it or Sinead O'Connor, but nothing compares to you. So don't do it. It just don't do it. Nothing compares to you in any context. So don't spend your energy doing that. And I want to share with you 2 things that I do um, before every podcast, sometimes during the podcast. And it's really good if you're feeling these things that like a little out of sorts, uncomfortable, unsure, uncertain, and yet you want to go forward anyway. So, this is a variation of what's called the schoolyard hookup. I always like to say I did not name that. I do not think that's a great name. It's kind of weird. But the reason that name came about is because this is something that little kids do sort of naturally when they're dysregulated and they need to re-regulate themselves. And the magical thing of energy medicine and energy medicine yoga, of course, is that it is intuitive. And so you've often seen little kids do this intuitively, sort of playing, where they twist themselves all up. They like wrap their legs together and they wrap their arms together and into like a little pretzel. And then they sort of just hang out there for a little bit. And while that looks really fun and it's fun for them to do, it is also actually incredibly energetically powerful in gathering all of the disparate systems together, specifically the meridian systems, which run the energy all up and down the body like roads. And you can imagine, this is a weird, I don't know if this metaphor is going to work because roads are sort of fixed, but if you imagine all the roads going haywire, and instead of going the way they're supposed to go, all of a sudden they just, think of like a cartoon of then the roads start to go off of their paths. And you need to get the roads back so that everybody can get to where they're needing to go. Everybody, meaning all of the energy that runs your body. And so that's what this does. So I'm going to give you a variation that's easy to teach through the airways. So wherever you are, unless you're driving a car, if you're driving, wait until you stop and then try this. You're just going to cross one foot over the other so that your ankles are crossed at the ankles. So for some of you that know the schoolyard hookup, the traditional one, this is going to be a little different. So the ankles are crossed, and then you're going to take one hand to the opposite shoulder. So I've got my right hand crossed over and holding on to the left shoulder, and then the left hand is crossing and holding on to the right shoulder. So my arms are crossed sort of at the forearms, and my hands are just hung on my shoulders. And then let's do this together. 3 breaths. If you're driving, you can do the breathing part with us right now. In the nose and out the mouth. Feels so good. We're going to now switch it. So whichever arm is in front, so for me, my left arm is in front, I'm going to just take the right arm and now cross it so that the right arm is in front and I still have my arms crossed over. And now I'm just going to switch my feet. So whichever one is in front is now in back and vice versa. And we'll take 3 more breaths in the nose and out the mouth. You can just release and just check in for a moment and see how you feel. Chances are you're feeling a little more calm, a little more grounded, maybe a little more aligned, if that word resonates for you. How about you, Blaine? How do you feel right now?
Super chilled out.
Yeah, that's a good place to start to do a podcast from, right? Or anything from a place where you're super chilled out and in your center. I'm going to show you one other technique. And this is if you really have gone into like the trembling, maybe into a little bit of anxiety, the criticism is starting to thunder around your head, and you still have to get out on the stage or get up in the front of the classroom or do something like that, and you just don't know what to do. This is called the blowout. And it's literally, if you think about, you've got some gunk in the pipes in your kitchen, and you've got to like blow out that gunk so that the water can run down the drain. And this is exactly what that is. Or maybe you've got a kink in the hose, and so the water's not flowing through, and you've got to unkink the hose. And so we're going to exhale with the sound SH. Oh, I get to swear twice in one episode. It's sort of like shh, like you're getting the shit out. This is really what you're doing. You're getting all of those critical voices, all of that nervous energy, all of the self-talk, all of the stuff that is stopping you, inhibiting you from being your authentic self. You're getting that out. And the movement that you're doing with your hands is you're just bringing them up overhead, like you're grabbing onto something and you're throwing down to the earth. So your hands just reach up and you're throwing them down to the earth and you're making that sound. So let's do that 3 times. And, we're sitting here at desks here and we can do it. But if you are like standing up, it's really great to like get your whole body kind of moving in this. So you can do it small, you can do it big. Either way, you're going to get that junk out. So let's do it together. Inhale, reach up, grab the junk, and just throw it down. I'll do that 2 more times. And you can just sort of check in with yourself, and often you'll feel sort of like an emptied out kind of feeling, like a clarity or a cleanness. Do you feel that, Blaine?
I do. I love the blowout. I have many applications for the blowout, but this is a really good one when you're just kind of in that agitated energy.
Yeah. So there's 2 things that Blaine and I do all the time to get us prepared to come here and share with you ways that you can go easier through your days and not feel that you're under the microscope or that you're being criticized or even praised overly, that you just get to do what it is that you do in alignment with your own values and staying true to yourself no matter what the winds are blowing outside of you. You are staying really calm and centered and confident, really, with what you're doing in the world. So I think that's a piece too that you can bring forward when you let go of all of those other things, because no matter how much nerves you have around things that you're doing, if you are stepping up and doing it, then you've got that confidence and to keep doing it. And so hopefully these 2 tools will help you find that space in yourself so that you can go forward and do your dharma and not be worried about anyone else's thoughts about you. You do you and let them do them, and everybody is at peace.
And if you feel helped by this podcast, we are trying to grow the podcast as much as we know that will put Lauren and I in future states of self-criticism. But we really are trying to grow, honestly, trying to grow the podcast. And the best way you can help us is to give us a rating and go in and give us a review or a comment. That really helps put the algorithm, put our podcast in front of other people who could also benefit for us. So quick ask from me and Lauren to go give us a review, give us a comment, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.